When I first encountered today's featured artist, with his surreal images of melting clocks and tigers emerging from flies or bees, I was struck with disbelief. I found myself asking, is this even possible? Is this truly creative? For me, it was an entirely unfamiliar world, one I had never experienced before, leaving me unsure of how to react. I suspect I'm not alone in this feeling. Many in my audience likely share this bewilderment. Today's hero is known for his astonishingly eccentric inventions. He created artificial fingernails with tiny mirrors, transparent mannequins filled with water and swimming fish to simulate blood circulation, and kaleidoscope glasses for car rides when the scenery became dull. He even designed spring-loaded shoes to ease walking and additional fake breasts on the back, though their purpose remained unclear. He was confident these innovations would revolutionize fashion, and his wife passionately promoted his ideas to anyone who would listen, often facing rejection. Despite the initial resistance, he continued to propose new, brilliant ideas. Eventually, the world recognized his genius, and he proved himself right in the end. There were two Salvador Dalís. The one we know was actually the second. Before his birth, his family had already had a son named Salvador Dalí, who tragically died at a young age from meningitis. When the second Salvador was born, his parents saw him as a reincarnation of their lost child. They remarked on the striking resemblance between the two boys, a belief that profoundly influenced how he viewed the world and his place in it. This connection to his deceased brother would later surface in his art, such as in the painting Portrait of My Deceased Brother. More importantly, he made a firm decision early on. He would not die young and would instead become great. Competing with the memory of his lost brother, he strove to avoid disappointing his parents. Salvador Dalí dreamed of being unique and unmatched, seeking every opportunity to prove himself from an early age. Dalí's eccentricity emerged early in his life. Simply put, he was content being a troublesome child, and he took pride in it. For instance, until he was about 8 years old, he intentionally wet the bed just to annoy his parents and draw attention to himself. He would throw tantrums and make demands, with his family often having to comply under his threat of death if they didn't do as he asked. At one point, his parents gifted him a masquerade costume as a king, and he would run around the house waving a scepter, reveling in his regal fantasy. Young Dalí had frequent outbursts of anger, during which he would attack people without provocation, including his younger sister, Ana Maria. One of the worst instances of his sadistic behavior occurred when he noticed a bridge without a safety railing and deliberately pushed a friend off it. The boy fell 16 feet and was seriously injured, but Salvador showed little remorse, calmly eating cherries while his friend's mother attended to her bloodied son. Additionally, Dalí would sometimes throw himself down a flight of stairs purely for the enjoyment of the pain. Salvador Dalí was born on May 11, 1904, at 8:45 a.m. GMT. He described his birth as suffering from the horrible traumatism of birth. Dalí even claimed to remember his prenatal experiences and the idyllic world he came from. He insisted he could recall his time in the womb as if it were yesterday, particularly a vision of a pair of eggs fried in a pan without a pan. This vision inspired his painting Fried Egg on the Plate Without the Plate, which he said reflected his intrauterine memories. In this painting, he reproduced the vivid colors he remembered, reminiscent of flames. This obsession with his prenatal fantasies is often seen as his attempt to recreate the paradise-like world he remembered, in stark contrast to the harsh realities of life. Salvador Dalí's family lived in the small Spanish town of Figueres in the province of Girona. His father, who ran a notary's office, was a generally respectable and serious man. For a while, Salvador tried to follow suit, but he quickly showed that his true passion was art. Dalí struggled academically, particularly in math, and was even held back a year. When bored in class, he would fake seizures and hallucinations, causing his teachers to eventually give up on trying to discipline him. Instead, They would give him pine balm to calm his nerves and let him rest in the garden. The only real illness young Dali suffered from was a chronic sore throat, which he exploited to avoid school, staying in bed to listen to his nanny's stories. Dali attended a Catholic school and later received his secondary education at the Academy of the Marist Brothers in Figueres. One day, for no apparent reason, he jumped down the stairs and seriously injured himself, finding pleasure in his own pain. He also enjoyed surprising his classmates with sudden attacks, which often resulted in him getting beaten up. Once, he punched a violinist classmate for being overly affectionate with his violin. Though the violinist did not retaliate, Dali stomped on the instrument. When confronted by his teacher, Dali claimed he was trying to prove the superiority of painting over music. At the age of 14, Dali had his first exhibition at a city event. In contrast to his poor school performance, he was a workaholic when it came to art, spending countless hours painting. He asked his parents to convert the attic laundry room into a studio. This space, dominated by a cement laundry tub, became his first workshop. In this studio, Dali painted, sculpted clay, and read art magazines, hanging his early works painted on cardboard from hat boxes. Dali had a penchant for collecting unusual objects or ordinary objects that fascinated him for some reason. One such object was a crutch he found at home, which, along with the theme of crutches, would frequently appear in his work. Even in his youth, he used unconventional artistic techniques, such as painting a Dermantine door with cherries and pressing real cherry stems into the paint. Though bugs eventually ate the cherries, leading some to criticize his choice of canvas, others found it intriguing, prompting Dali to deliberately add more worms to the door. He was mesmerized by the decomposition of a dead hedgehog, and this fascination with the extinction of life became a recurring theme in his work. Dali was also deeply interested in how light falls on objects and how different materials and shapes can create illusions. This ability to see one object in the form of another due to light or shape coincidence eventually became the foundation of his surrealism. Salvador Dalí had many peculiar ideas, whims, and phobias. One of the most notable was his pathological fear of grasshoppers. His classmates often exploited this fear, throwing the insects at him or slipping them between the pages of his textbooks. To divert attention from this genuine phobia, Dalí concocted an even more bizarre, albeit fake, fear: crumpled paper. He would dramatically display horror and hysteria at the sight of crumpled paper, which successfully shifted his classmates' focus away from the grasshoppers. One incident involving this fabricated fear led to his expulsion from college. A teacher instructed him to pick up a piece of crumpled paper that had been thrown. To avoid revealing his real fear, Dalí poured a can of ink over the paper, effectively conquering his fake phobia. He then picked up the wet, dirty paper and placed it on the professor's chair, an act that resulted in his expulsion from the institution. When Dalí was 25, he finally met his muse. Up until then, he knew little about women. Though he was attracted to them and appreciated their beauty, especially elegant women, he had a terrible fear of socializing with them. Dalí was also repelled by anything mundane or commonplace. His muse, Helena Diakonoff Devulina, was at the time married to the French surrealist poet Paul Éluard. Known by the name Gala, which means a festive gala concert in French, she truly embodied a spirit of celebration and catastrophe. Born in Moscow in the Russian Empire, she had attended grammar school with the poet Marina Tsveteva before contracting tuberculosis and going to Switzerland for treatment. It was there she met and married Paul Éluard. The couple vacationed with friends, often meeting local artists. Dalí had been observing Gala, Éluard's new acquaintance, and was quite taken with her. The next day, they went to the beach together. Determined to impress her, Dalí cut up his shirt, placed a flower behind his ear, and perfumed himself with a concoction of fish glue and goat dung. Seeing Gala in her swimsuit on the sand for the first time, he realized she was the woman of his dreams. Finding his initial presentation inadequate, he discarded his eccentric outfit and approached her in a more conventional manner. Despite his nervousness, which made him laugh hysterically at whatever Gala said, she was intrigued. It was perhaps love at first sight, and they were clearly destined for each other. Dali later wrote that Gala shattered his loneliness. With her arrival, the narcissistic cocoon surrounding him cracked open. No longer was there just Dali, the unique and unrepeatable. Now there were two, Dali and Gala. Gala eventually left her husband and married Dali in 1934. Their relationship was unconventional, as Gala had numerous extramarital affairs, mostly with young artists, including her ex-husband Eluar. Dali, who practiced candleism, a fantasy where a man exposes his partner to others for their voyeuristic pleasure, encouraged these affairs. Despite this, Gala remained Dali's most important muse, his greatest passion, and his business manager, and they enjoyed a long and successful partnership. One day, Dali and Gala had a confrontation that was anything but ordinary. Dali demanded that Gala express her most intense and passionate desire, avoiding anything banal. Gala, always one step ahead, responded with a shocking request: "Kill me." Consumed with desire, Dali contemplated pushing her into an abyss. Overwhelmed by the thought, they kissed and fantasized about a tragic death, like Romeo and Juliet at the height of happiness. Their relationship was a fusion of intense Catalan and Russian passions. Dali, with his striking looks and bohemian style, could impress any woman, especially one with Gala's imagination. Once, he gave her one of his teeth, which she hung from the ceiling as a symbol of their bond. At that time, Dali was not wealthy or famous, and was notoriously impractical, even believing that a 500-franc coin was worth more than a 1,000-franc bill. In contrast, Gala was resourceful, pragmatic, and adept at navigating life's challenges, as any Russian woman of her time would be. She was determined, cunning, and tenacious. She often appeared scandalous, rude, and sarcastic, yet she achieved her goals by any means necessary. Gala tirelessly promoted Dali's wildest ideas to patrons, facing numerous rejections, but always persisting. She was his lover, muse, secretary, and personal manager. Their artistic partnership was highly successful for much of their marriage. Gala was Dali's inspiration and favorite model, appearing in his works as Galatea at the moment of creation, as the Madonna, and even with 2 ribs of lamb balanced on her shoulder. When asked by journalists why he painted his wife with meat on her shoulder, Dali quipped, "I love my wife, and I love ribs. Why not paint them together?" However, he had a deeper, more psychoanalytic explanation. He saw the ribs as a symbol of vicarious sacrifice, reflecting his desire to devour, understand, and appropriate. Dali's relationship with Gala also led to a rift with his father. In one of his works, Dali inscribed, "I spit on the portrait of my mother." Although he adored his late mother, this act was too much for his father, who disowned him. In response, Dali sent his father a vial of his own semen with the message, "I don't owe you anything more." Dali was deeply fascinated by psychoanalysis, regularly reading Freud and engaging in numerous conversations with psychoanalysts. Already famous and having traveled across much of Europe, Dali once brought Freud an article on paranoia, presenting it as a scientific work. Freud's assessment of Dali as a typical Spaniard and fanatic delighted him immensely. The 1930s were a pivotal decade for the bohemian art scene, especially within surrealism. Surrealism was an influential movement where artists rejected rationality in favor of unlocking the imagination through the unconscious mind. Dali became not only the most renowned, but also the most financially successful surrealist artist. One of his most significant contributions to surrealism was the paranoiac critical method, developed in the early 1930s. This technique involved the artist inducing a paranoid state to access the subconscious through systematic, irrational thought. To reach this state, Dali would often stand on his head until he nearly passed out. He was particularly interested in how the brain, in a paranoid state, could perceive irrational links between unrelated things. Dali described the paranoia critical method as a spontaneous method of irrational knowledge based on the critical and systematic objectivity of the associations and interpretations of delirious phenomena. Surrealism, founded by French writer André Breton, deeply influenced Dali after he encountered Breton's journal The Surrealist Revolution in 1924. As political tensions rose in Europe before World War II, the Surrealists opposed Adolf Hitler and Nazism. However, Dali controversially supported Francisco Franco, the fascist dictator of Spain, and made provocative remarks about dreaming of Hitler as a woman whose flesh ravished me. He even painted The Enigma of Hitler in 1939. These actions led to his expulsion from the Surrealist group in 1939, prompting some Surrealists to refer to Dali as if he were dead. In response, Dali famously declared, "I myself am Surrealism." During the 1930s, Dali developed his unique and easily recognizable painting style. Early in the decade, he created one of his most famous works, The Persistence of Memory, featuring the iconic melting clocks that symbolize non-linear subjective time. In 1936, he painted Soft Construction with Boiled Beans, premonition of civil war, depicting a monstrous form made of human bodies tormenting each other, symbolizing the Spanish Civil War through surrealist imagery, with the shape resembling Spain and incorporating boiled beans. Around the same period, Dali produced other notable works such as Burning Giraffe and The Metamorphosis of Narcissus. These paintings further cemented his reputation as a master of surrealism, blending his fascination with psychoanalysis, politics, and symbolism into his art. In 1940, Salvador Dalí and Gala left Spain without enough money for their journey. They were assisted by another great modern artist, Pablo Picasso, whom Dalí greatly respected and considered his mentor. Picasso, in turn, supported Dalí. They returned 8 years later, during which time Dalí conquered the New World. He arrived in America brimming with new ideas, continuously producing work that first captivated Europe and then America. Dalí's art became a significant hit in the United States and achieved commercial success. Dalí lived between New York and California, hosting extravagant and decadent parties. He worked across various fields, including fine art and design, maintaining a prolific output. He was commissioned to design 2 window displays for a Manhattan store, but when the store owners altered his designs without informing him, Dalí furiously smashed the windows and was arrested. The press widely covered this incident, and Dalí became a national hero in America. He collaborated with Walt Disney and worked with director Alfred Hitchcock. One of his enduring contributions was designing the Chupa Chups logo, which is still in use today. In 1942, he published his autobiography, The Secret Life of Salvador Dalí, which also proved to be commercially successful. A major disappointment in Dalí's life was the eventual fracture of his love story with Gala. He was deeply attached to her, and in 1968, he bought a castle in Pubal for her. However, from 1971, Gala stayed there for weeks at a time, allowing Dalí to visit only by written invitation. The fear of Gala abandoning him contributed to his depression and declining health. In 1980, Dalí had to retire from painting due to a motor disorder that caused his hands to tremble. When Gala died on June 10, 1982, Dalí's depression worsened and he lost much of his will to live. He deliberately dehydrated himself, leading to speculation that it was a deliberate act of self-harm. In 1984, a fire broke out in Dalí's bedroom, and he had to be rescued by his friend Robert Descharnes, which was possibly another act of self-harm. Salvador Dalí died of heart failure on January 23, 1989, at the age of 84,